Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to MetrObelisk Radio. Today, we are taking a look at Survivor's first returning player season, Survivor All-Stars. For this season, I'm going to handle things differently. An All-Star season is usually a time capsule when you look at it. Therefore, this cannot be judged by modern eyes. I have to put myself back in 2003, 2004, back when the season originally came out, and judge whether or not it was a good season then from a casting point of view. And remember, kids, gameplay never ages, so this should be very fun to look at. Now, before we go any further, remember to follow the blog, MetrObeliskRadio.blogspot.com, where you can stay up to date on all MetrObelisk Radio uploads, no matter if they're exclusive to the platform that you are currently watching or listening to this on. Now, with that out of the way, let's get right into All-Stars. Now, as always, I start off by looking at the twists, and there weren't many twists this season. Now, the only big twist to this game, other than all of the people here having played the game before, is instead of 2 tribes competing against each other, it's 3 tribes. Ooh. Any modern Survivor fans will basically tell you and go, yeah, what else is new? That's standard. You know, and I want to look at how they handle that first swap, and I think it's rather ingenious. At the reward challenge at Final 14, the losing tribe would be absorbed by the other 2 tribes via a schoolyard pick. Instead of drawing buffs and it basically coming down to luck of the draw, the other tribes could pick their new tribe members. Now, the tribe that finishes the challenge first gets first pick, and the tribe that finishes second gets second pick. You know, just to make it just that much more exciting. And I'm thinking, you know, man, someone could get really, really screwed over here. But unfortunately, no one really got screwed from it. So how great of a twist was it? I mean, you be the judge of that. Now, how I'm going to handle the cast assessment for this episode is going to be quite different than what I did for the first few episodes. Instead of looking at each tribe individually, like the Shapara tribe, Mogo Mogo, all that shit, I'm not doing that. I'm going to look at, each season, what season each of the players are coming from, and judge whether or not these people were genuinely all-stars at the time, or if they're simply just there to be a body. So first, let's look at the very first season, Survivor Borneo, and yes, by this time, in 2003, 2004, it was being called Survivor Borneo, and we're going to start with Richard Hatch. I've been bamboozled! Yes, All-Stars was the season where he said that. Now, obviously, he was the first winner of Survivor back when the first season was just called Survivor. It's retroactively called Survivor Borneo. Now, I feel that this is more than enough to put him under the All-Star category at the time this season released, simply because, hey, he's the very first winner. What the fuck have you done type thing. Now, next from the season is Rudy Bosch. Now, he was the fan favorite from Borneo and continued to be the fan favorite for years and years and years up until his passing. Now, the fan poll that was released during the reunion of Borneo, who would you, the audience, like to see win? Rudy had the highest percentage at 45% of the audience polled, and Kelly was second at 42%. Hatch was only at 11% at the time, and Suhawk was only at 2%. So next, let's look at Jenna Lewis. Now, we all know that she's here because Colleen said no at the time. We do know that Colleen was on the list of people that production wanted to come back for this season, and she had said no. And there really wasn't anything that Jenna Lewis really did in Borneo to even be considered an all-star other than just run around in a pink bikini all day. That really was it. And finally, from Borneo, we have Sue Hawk. And for me, I put her at the same as Jenna Lewis. Now, if we're looking at the fan pool of who should have won the game, Kelly pulled significantly higher than Sue did. Now, I understand that Sue was also in that alliance with Richard, Rudy, Kelly, and herself. And I feel that production couldn't get Kelly to come back at the time. And with Sue, you could technically put her in the All-Star category, given that she was a part of the first major alliance in Survivor. But again, for me, that's just a technicality. Next, let's look at the second season of Survivor, and that was the Australian Outback. And we're going to start off with the winner of the season, that was Tina. Now, she not only was the first woman to win the game, granted it was the second season at the time, she was also the first to win based purely on a social game over a physical or strategic game. And I feel that she would fall into the All-Star category just for that alone. And next up, we've got Colby Donaldson, obviously the fan favorite from that season at the time. Now, he falls into the All-Star category because he was insanely popular at this time. You know, even with the rise of Rupert, back in 2003, 2004, he was one of, if not the most popular contestant on the show. Now, his popularity alone is what puts him in the All-Star category, again, at the time, back in 03, 04. And next up is Jerry. Now, I personally wouldn't consider her an all-star, but I understand why they would want to bring her back, because if you're going to bring back Colby, then you got to bring back Jerry. And remember, Colby and Jerry were arch rivals in the Outback at the time. So I think production was kind of hoping that some revenge was going to go down, which it did. Next from Australian Outback, we had Alicia. Now, she was the brute of Australian Outback. At the time, she was an all-star for one main reason, and that reason is her verbal spat with Kimmy Kappenberg. It was the argument that almost saw fist flying, you know, the whole "don't you dare put my finger in your face" type bullshit. And honestly, I don't even remember what the fight was over. I just remember it was one of the highlights of the Australian Outback, and I personally found it really funny. Oh, hell nah. Putting her in the All-Stars category back in 03, 04, it really made sense in that regard. And finally, from the Australian Outback, we've got Amber. Now, we know that she's here because Elizabeth had said no. And she was the perfect example of someone who got far into the game that wasn't that good at the game. Honestly, she was one of the most forgettable contestants at the time. Now, why did they bring her back for All-Stars? Because she's just a body. Sports fans are going to know what that means. Now, for those that aren't sports fans or who don't know what "quote unquote" just a body means, let's say you and four other friends want to play a pickup game of basketball. Now, to make it fair, the game needs to be 3-on-3 because there's five of you. So one of those five people are going to have to go out into the crowd somewhere and find somebody to join their team, essentially just to be a body. That sixth man really doesn't have to know how to play basketball. He or she just has to be on the court to keep the numbers fair, and that really is it. Now, before I tangent off for too long, let's get to Survivor Africa. And the first person brought back from Africa was the winner. That was Ethan. Now, he was a part of the alliance with Lex and Big Tom at the time. Ethan was the first winner where the vast majority of the audience went, "You know what? I'm glad Ethan won." And this was long before his cancer or non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. For the reason I stated proper, where the vast majority liked him as a winner, he would be considered an all-star at the time. Even if people didn't remember his name, if you brought up Survivor Africa, people would ask, "Isn't that the season that the soccer player won?" And then the next person to be brought back from Africa was Lex. Now, who could forget Lex in his infamous snake hunt against Kelly Goldsmith at the time? Now, when I was younger and watching Survivor, I remembered him as the guy just with all the tattoos. And that's why I liked him when I was younger, just because I thought his tattoos were cool. But yes, he was an all-star more than just for his tattoos. He was quite memorable in Africa. And finally, we've got Big Tom. Now, he was an all-star at the time purely because he was Rupert before Rupert was. You know, the difference between Tom and Rupert is Tom was just a good old country boy. Now I argue that this is what made him more relatable than someone like Rupert. Rupert was more of a character, whereas Big Tom was just Big Tom, and what you see is what you got. And honestly, to close off the section of Africa, if you're going to bring back three people from Africa, you would want to bring back Ethan, Lex, and Big Tom, because, come on, all three were probably the most popular from their season alone. Now let's move on to Survivor's fourth season. That was the Marquesas. And the first person to be brought back here is Boston Rob. Now, he was the villain for the Marquesas. And what propelled him into the all-star status that he found himself in was the feud that he had with John Carroll in this season. After the swap and going into the merge, it was John Carroll versus Boston Rob. John Carroll got Boston Rob voted out of the game, and even before that, he basically ran his tribe from the shadows. He was the quote-unquote Rob father. And finally, from Marquesas, they brought back Kathy. Now, at the time of Marquesas, this is the woman that everybody wanted to win that season. And it wasn't just the jury, but also the audience. And for that alone, she would be considered an all-star at the time of all-stars. And there was only one person brought back from Thailand, and that was Xi'an. For those that don't remember, this is the woman who got screwed by the bullshit delayed merge twist. Now, I would argue that she was not an all-star at the time. I feel that she is only in this season because All-Stars happened to be the 8th season, and Thailand was the 5th. Had All-Stars happened later, like season 16 or 17, Survivor Thailand gets completely ignored in my opinion. However, with All-Stars being season 8, Thailand has to be brought up because there were only 7 seasons prior to this one. Who better to bring back than the person who got screwed by a bullshit delayed merge twist that thank God they never brought back. And then looking at the Amazon, we've got the winner brought back. That was Jenna Maraska. Now, at this time, she was the youngest person to ever win the game when she was 21. Now, what made her an All-Stars was not the fact that she won the game at all. It was the fact that she stripped for chocolate and peanut butter along with Heidi Strobel. And that's what she will forever be remembered for in the Survivor world. It's not her victory. It's, I would totally take my clothes off for chocolate and peanut butter. And finally from the Amazon, we've got Rob Cesternino. Now, at the time of the Amazon and even this season, he was ranked as the best player to never win the game. He got 3rd in the Amazon. Now, other than Richard Hatch, he was the Grandmaster Strategist. Now, what he was known for was switching between his alliances to always remain one step ahead. And remember, kids, there were no hidden immunity idols back during this time. That would not get introduced until Survivor Guatemala, which will be 3 seasons after All-Stars. And now we have hit the 7th and final season, the Pearl Islands, and there was only one person brought back from this season, and that was really weird. It was Rupert, of all people. Now, Rupert at the time was probably the most popular contestant from the Pearl Islands. At the time, he was an all-star simply because he was the beloved tie-dyed pirate with the pet snake Balboa. Now, I would argue that his popularity benefited from the fact that he was just in the right place at the right time, and I'll get more into this later on. Now, I really want to pivot and do something a little different. I want to look at the players who turned it down. Now, I did a little bit of research, and I can only find 4 that knowingly turned it down, so we're just going to go down the list with these. We obviously know about Colleen. I brought it up. Mark Burnett confirmed that she had told him something to the effect of that she had just moved on with her life and she didn't want to go through it again. And it makes sense because there were a lot of horror stories for years about how former contestants just their health got purely destroyed after competing on Survivor. Next was Elizabeth. Now, she turned it down because she had taken the job of co-host on The View at the time, and she would actually remain on The View until 2013. Next up was actually Sandra from the Pearl Islands. Now, she had turned it down because of the parasites that she contracted in the Pearl Islands. Now, she would ultimately come back for Heroes Villains, where she would win the game for the 2nd time, Game Changers, and Winners at War. And also, she came back to be a mentor in the season that must not be named. If you're curious about that season, look it up. It's rather known what happens. And finally, Heidi Strobel, the second girl who stripped for chocolate and peanut butter. Now, she turned it down for obvious reasons, but I'm going to go into it. After the Amazon had wrapped, she was temporarily paralyzed from a spider bite that she had got at some point in the game. Now, I remember that by the end of that season, she had to actually be carried into the tribal council area. Now, she also claimed that she was hospitalized afterwards for kidney failure as a result of the parasite she had contracted. In fact, the only reason that she agreed to pose for Playboy at the time with Jenna Maraska was just to pay her medical bills. Now, it's safe to say that she probably had no interest in ever returning to the show after this happened to her. Now, it was rather known at the time that some people ultimately got cut from the season as well. So we're going to take a look at those guys too, starting with Survivor Africa. Kelly Goldsmith was originally supposed to be on the season. I personally would have rather seen her in the season than Amber. She arguably is more of an all-star than Amber was. And she's more of an all-star because of Lex's infamous snake hunt. After the merge, he wanted to find out who voted for him, and he thought it was Kelly. It wasn't. It was Teresa. So it would have been very eventful if in this season, both Kelly and Lex make the merge to see if she gets her revenge on Lex in that moment. But unfortunately, that's just something we're never going to know now. And the last person to get cut was Teresa, otherwise known as T-Bird. Now, personally, I wouldn't consider her much of an all-star just because, had the swap not happened in Africa, she was definitely the next person to go from the Samburu tribe. As a result of the swap, she makes it to the Final Five, and that's not much to be considered an all-star even back in 03, 04. And then from Marquesas, there were two people that were cut. The first guy was Sean. He was Boston Rob's partner in crime in the Marquesas at the time. And I feel that the season really didn't need him because you already had Boston Rob. You had the more memorable of the two in the season already, so I feel that Sean just wasn't necessary for that reason alone. And finally, we have Nalia from Marquesas. Now, nowadays, she is considered an all-star, and I would personally love to see her play the game again. However, back in 03, 04, that wasn't the case. Marquesas had what was considered the most boring Final Two of any season as a result of Nalia and Pascal flipping the game on its head at Final 9. Again, this season has aged very, very well. But remember, Survivor All-Stars is a time capsule of Survivor from 03, 04. You can't look at the casting decisions from modern eyes, like I said in the intro. And finally, there were two people cut from Thailand that we know of, and that was, the first one was Clay. And I feel that there were enough villains in the game already, from Hatch to Lex, Boston Rob, Rob Sesternino, and Jerry. Just throwing another villain into the mix this season just would have been too much. And the last person from Thailand to get cut was Helen, and I don't think she really did all that much in Thailand. In fact, I already brought this up with Xi'an, but Thailand was not well liked at the time. Xi'an is the only person that production could have justified coming back. Had All-Stars happen when Micronesia happened, that was season 16, Thailand gets completely ignored because there were simply just better players by season 16. Now let's move on and actually talk about the gameplay of this season. We're obviously going to start with the pre-merge. Now this season is different in the sense that these people have played before, and you would think that the pre-merge game would be different as a result of that, and it was to a degree. This is the part of the game where all of the former winners got out of the game. For everyone that was there who didn't want to win the game, it made no sense to get rid of those people as early as you could. You don't want to give the $1 million to the same exact winner twice. You non-winners want to win the game. You don't want Rich, Tina, Ethan, or Jenna Maraska to win the game again. Come on, that's just common sense at the time. And this is also the part of the game where the blindsides came in. And the biggest one in the pre-merge was Colby. When Lex blindsided him. Now, this would be the only blindside of the game because Lex at least told Ethan that he was being voted off. So you can't really consider that much of a blindside if the guy already knew about it. And this is also the part where two people knowingly quit the game. The first was Jenna Maraska, obviously. Now, she had admitted to making a bad judgment call by going out and playing Survivor again with her mother's condition. Now, to be fair, she made the right call by leaving when she did. The show had the text that said that her mom had died 8 days after she had quit the game. And Sue Hawk would be the second person to quit this season. Now, I'm personally not going to put a dog in this fight. However, I feel that Boston Rob analyzed the situation well during the season, saying something to the effect of there's three possibilities. A, she's looking for a payday after Richard Hatch, quote-unquote, rubbed up on her. B, she really was distressed by Richard Hatch rubbing up against her. Or C, she's using the distress as a leverage in the game. I'm going to personally leave that conclusion of that up to you, but also remember this, Sue Hawk did sue Survivor at the time that this happened right after All Stars aired, and there was a settlement. And remember, kids, settlements do not prove guilt, so keep that in mind when you're coming up with your conclusion. Now let's talk about the post-merge portion. Now this is the point in the game where a lot of people complain that the game got too personal. And all I'm going to say is, Boston Rob made the game personal. It stems back to just prior to the merge when he asked Lex to protect Amber from getting voted out after she got screwed by the swap. So Lex voted out one of his number one allies at the time, that was Jerry, and what did he get for it? A knife to the back. The same thing happened with Alicia, where Boston Rob made a handshake deal alliance with her just prior to the merge, not knowing if Amber made it. The same thing happened to Big Tom, where Rob and Amber made a Final 3 pact with him and cut him at Final 5. And I almost forgot, Kathy at one point wanted to give up her immunity to Lex because she didn't want to be in the game where the personal friendships are going to come back and now are going to get burned. Simply, Boston Rob made too many deals with too many people, and he was just bound to piss people off. Now let's talk about the final two, and we're going to start with the winner of the game, and that was Amber. I personally don't know if she should have won the game because she just stayed under Boston Rob's wing, and Kathy even called it out at Final Tribal when she asked her if her relationship between her and Rob was going to continue, or if she just used her sex appeal to set up Rob as the patsy. Now, for those that don't know what a patsy is, it's a mob term that means fall guy. You're the guy that takes the blame if the entire family or operation goes down like the Hindenburg. Maybe it was the best thing for her to do, but personally, I don't respect any women who win the game by leveraging their sex appeal. They only won because they basically just batted their eyes and got the guy to do exactly what they wanted. Oh, please, baby. And then the runner-up was Boston Rob. And all I'm going to say is this. I know that a lot of people wanted him to win the game. If Boston Rob wanted to win the game, then he shouldn't have leveraged his real-world friendships with some of these people to advance himself in the game. I hate to break it to everybody, but people don't forget about the guy who screwed them over. Lex saves Amber from being voted out, effectively putting himself and Mogo Mogo in a worse spot in the merge. What does Lex get for saving Boston Rob's girlfriend? A knife to the back. Alicia makes a handshake alliance with him and says his word is his bond. What does Alicia get? A knife to the fucking back. Big Tom makes a final 3-pack with Rob and Amber. What does Big Tom get? A fucking knife to the back. Do you see what I'm getting at here? At the jury phase of the game, this is the only part of the game that truly matters. He decides to betray a bunch of alliances and then turn around and ask the same people that he betrayed to vote for him to win the money. Well, those people who you betrayed aren't going to forget that you screwed them over. Are these people going to award you are these people going to award you the money for screwing them over that badly? No. No, they're not. They're not going to give the jackass the money. They're going to vote for option number 2 because, hey, fuck you, Rob. Now let's jump over and talk about the reunion. And honestly, the reunion wouldn't get talked about without one event from happening. And that one event was Boston Rob proposing to Amber before the votes were read to determine the winner. So I have to ask just one simple question. How is that not conspiring to share the money? Again, I believe that production has wanted to have a Survivor couple since the first season, and they finally got it. So they probably just let it go after that. And this would also be the first reunion where someone willingly walks out midway through. Jerry decided that she had just had enough and just left. Now, she did come out after that and criticize Jeff for the way that he handled the reunion at America's Tribal Council. Now, to be fair, she had a point. In my opinion, the audience can react how they want to react to a degree. If they want to cheer or boo whoever is talking, who cares? However, if the crowd becomes too hostile towards the person making a point and that person has no choice but to leave, then the host needs to step in and basically shut that shit down. And this is why I keep reiterating that Jeff is not the best person to host these reunions. A good host will always allow the audience to get their digs in on whoever is talking. But after a while, the good host will basically politely tell the crowd to shut the fuck up. And if you as the host don't know when to step in and say that, then you shouldn't be the host. All you need to have happen is enough of your cast on stage not feel safe while they're there. You know what'll happen? They'll just leave and never come back. And now they have the story about how they didn't feel protected, they were scared, and afraid of what could potentially happen to them later on, so they felt that they needed to get the fuck out of Dodge for their own safety. Now let's talk about the big twist of the season, the big twist at the reunion. It's coming, it's coming. It was America's Tribal Council. Yay! The best thing to ever happen to Survivor, said no one ever. Now, I'm going to be fucking blunt with this. This was an absolute waste of 42 minutes. I'm never going to get those 42 minutes of my life back. And the only good thing that came from this is where it was announced where Survivor was going next, and that would be Vanuatu at the time. Now, how this worked was it was the popular vote of who America thought was the best player, and that person would get $1 million from CBS. Now, they couldn't just do that for 42 minutes. What they did was they had other categories for you to vote in, like Best Survivor Fight. The one that won that category was Fair Play versus Rupert in the Pearl Islands after Johnny tried to vote him out, with Trish. Then it was Survivor's Hottest Man. Now, Colby won that at the time. Surprise, surprise there. All of the women just, were going nuts over Colby back in 2003, 2004. He was the cowboy version of Fabio. Oh my God. Now, funny enough, you don't see or hear much about him anymore. So just because you're popular at the time doesn't mean that's going to carry you for very long. And I say that Colby Donaldson was very much a man of his time and nothing more. And I'm moving on from that. Then there was Survivor's Hottest Woman that Amber had won. Now, how in the hell did Amber from All Stars win over Dara from the Pearl Islands? I'll never know. Personally, I think Dara was way, way hotter than Amber was. But that's just me. I'm just some random jackass on the internet. So, who fucking cares about that guy? Then there was the Best Villain, which, of course, Fair Play took by fucking storm. Surprise, surprise there. All you need to say is, how's Grandma? And finally, it ended with Most Memorable Moment, and that went to Rupert stealing the shoes from the Morgan tribe at the beginning of the Pearl Islands. And that is the moment from the list that hasn't aged very well. The other moments were Jenna and Heidi stripping for chocolate and peanut butter, Sue Hawk's Snakes and Rats speech, Johnny Fairplay's dead grandma lie, and Mike scooping falling into the fire. All of those other moments that I mentioned, people still talk about to this day. I never hear anyone talk about the moment that Rupert stole the Morgan shoes. Who fucking cares now? Big whoopee, big fucking deal. And let's be honest about this whole thing, this whole America's Tribal Council thing. It was just an excuse to give Rupert $1 million at the time. Remember, kids, Rupert at this time was the most popular contestant to ever play Survivor. Now, why was he so popular? That really beats me. I personally found him obnoxious and annoying. Thank God that they only did this once and never again. What would come of this is the quote-unquote player of the season that would be voted on by America before the reunion, before the finale and then reunion. And the winner of that would receive $100K instead of $1 million. Now, for the longest time, it was Cricket that sponsored that. Then Sprint took over for quite a while. And then Survivor just stopped giving that award out. And let's be honest, because they probably weren't pulling in the ratings anymore like they were prior to season 20. Now, I'll end the episode off with this. Had this season not ended with Boston Rob and Amber getting engaged and then later married, this season would never get talked about ever again. It would have just disappeared into the ether and remembered as just a really piss-poor season. This being the first returning player season, this should have been a home run. However, with how the game was played, that turned this season into a strikeout. There's a difference between a game of blindsides and a game of betrayals. This season was nothing but a game of betrayals, and that's never really fun to watch. This season's gameplay got personal because Boston Rob made it personal. I find it difficult to feel sorry for him not winning the game because, in all fairness, he threw the first punch when he asked Lex for a favor that goes beyond the game, and that basically was take care of Amber and I'll take care of you. What did Lex get? I'll reiterate it again, a knife to the back. No way Boston Rob was winning this season with the amount of people that he screwed over. This is all this season is remembered for. This season totaled about 16 to 17 hours, including that bullshit America's Tribal Council, and I will never get those 16 to 17 hours of my life back. Don't make the same mistake I made by watching this season. I'm not the type of guy to tell you what to watch, but if you skip this season, I don't think you would lose a wink of sleep.